evening and welcome to NTV's Grow. I'm Steve White. Tonight we talk with U.S. Senator Deb Fischer about farm policy in Washington, and farmers share concerns over privacy issues and the EPA. And city kids here in Grand Island learn more about life on the farm. But we start with a look at headlines, and that includes the USDA, which now says meat inspectors will stay on the job despite the previous talk of furloughs. An amendment proposed in the Senate last week is aimed at preventing any meatpacking plant closures due to the sequester budget cuts. The Agriculture Department warned that the furloughs of meat inspectors could cost $10 billion in production losses and lost wages of $400 million. The Senate voted unanimously to provide $55 million for more food inspection. Farmers are filing a record $16 billion in crop insurance claims for 2012 because of widespread drought. And the staggering amount has critics calling for changes in the federal crop insurance program. Farmers buy that crop insurance, but the federal government pays 62% of their premiums and picks up the tab for losses over a certain amount. One analyst estimates the federal tab for 2012 will come to about $11 billion. It's the second consecutive year of record crop insurance payments. And there are signs old agricultural disputes could be deal killers for President Barack Obama's goal of creating the world's largest free trade agreement. European Union leaders don't want negotiations to include discussions on their ban of genetically modified crops or other regulations which keep U.S. farm products out of Europe. But the president said it's hard to imagine a pact that doesn't address those issues. Powerful agricultural lobbies say they will do their best to make sure Congress rejects any deal that fails to deal with those restrictions. From those free trade agreements and crop insurance to the looming debate over the Farm Bill. Farm policy is a big topic in Washington these days, one we caught up with Senator Deb Fischer to talk more about. Our folks in agriculture certainly don't like regulations. I hear every day things about the EPA and these kinds of things.
Everybody wants clean air. Everybody wants clean water, but let's have some common sense. As I said, people all across the state, whether they're in small businesses, in manufacturing, in agriculture, they all have complaints about regulations.
They want to see government spending controlled in some of these things, which we still have a long way to go.
Oh, we have a really long way to go. We have a government that just keeps growing spending.
One issue that I've talked with farmers in particular, they say we're willing to be part of the solution. We want to pass a farm bill, and we're willing to cut a lot of programs that we've relied on for a lot of years.
I support the bill that was introduced by the Senate before I got there and that was passed by the Senate. It does away with direct payments, and farmers were good with that. The main priority for farmers in this state has been crop insurance. That's what we're going to focus on, and hopefully we're going to see that farm bill passed.
Well, Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Several groups are speaking out after the EPA released private information about poultry and livestock operations from around 30 states. The National Chicken Council, National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and the National Pork Producers Council sent a letter to the EPA administrator in February. They expressed deep concern over the public release of personal data. That information was gathered from state authorities and was then simply transmitted as two separate Freedom of Information Act requests. The ag groups say the EPA apparently released the information without undertaking a review of it to protect against the release of private or confidential business information that may have been improperly included in the state's submissions. The letter stated, quotes, "The overwhelming majority of those farms are owned and operated by families who are honorably engaged in honest work to produce livestock and poultry to support themselves, their families, their communities, our countries, and consumers around the world. We object in the strongest terms possible to the release of this data for possible use by groups who oppose our members' business and way of life." And this is just the latest case of farmers speaking out about alleged privacy concerns with the EPA. Last year, Senator Mike Johanns called on the EPA to end feedlot flyovers. The EPA says that was all about fairness, saying flights allow them to check many operators at once to make sure they're following regulations, a topic addressed this past winter at the Farmers Union Convention.
That's why we do what we do, and we chose to use overflights as an efficient method to do that. But I'm also not stupid. I come from a farm, and I recognize that it gets people pretty excited about privacy issues, and so we'll continue to talk to them about that.
Another area of concern has been dust on farms. The EPA says it has no plans to put monitors on combines or tractors or anything like that. Even with a couple of nice snowfalls this winter, experts now say our reserve of soil moisture is now gone. Officials at the National Drought Mitigation Center say the reserve was amassed during several years of relatively generous rainfall. 96% of the state remains in extreme or exceptional drought. But experts are expecting storm systems to make their way across the state in the next few weeks before cornfields are planted for the 2013 crop. And the latest government snapshot of the Kansas winter wheat crop is still portraying a grim picture. The Kansas Agricultural Statistics Service says 31% of the wheat is in poor to very poor condition. Only 2% is in excellent condition. The agency also says topsoil moisture levels statewide in Kansas are 47% short to very short. Subsoil moisture supplies are faring far worse, with 82% reported as short to very short. Farmers are, of course, preparing for the effects of that 2012 drought to linger into 2013. Abe Smith, a range and pasture specialist, says most pastures across the state are very stressed right now. But even if your fields are brown and dry, that doesn't mean you should ignore weed and brush control this spring.
It can really be a critical factor to trying to maintain pasture levels. And what's odd is sometimes people forego pasture weed control options in the spring of drought years just to try and save themselves a few dollars, when in fact, when you're in these stressed times, that's when pastures really can decrease in their value in terms of their forage production.
Smith encourages producers to consider herbicides or different grazing management techniques in the spring. If you treat your pastures now, even moisture in the short term can help boost forage production for the season. Some beginning farmers will likely need some help this year with much more than their pastures. Fortunately, there are some workshops coming up around the state. 3 will focus on the concepts of mob grazing and marketing of grass-fed beef. The other 3 will focus on beginning farmers and vegetable and fruit production. You can see a list of dates and times right here on your screen. People are urged to register at least 3 days before each event by contacting your local UNL Extension office. Grand Island is growing thanks in no small part to agriculture. Yet many city kids, even some who live in rural areas, simply don't know about life on the farm. But there's a program trying to connect kids to what happens in agriculture. The annual Egg Day attendance was way up this year. With 800 kids, it was double last year. And whether it's teachers, media coverage, or proximity to the state fair, they say Grand Island kids are starting to get the message.
I think agriculture is getting around to the schools a lot better than it used to be, so they're getting more educated where their food's coming from, and it makes a smarter America.
FFA students from Grand Island Northwest showed off cows, pigs, goats, and sheep, plus kids learned from groups like the Pork Producers and University Extension Service. It's a very controversial practice, genetically modified crops. What's it mean for producers? That story's coming up next.
I learned that the insects help, or the bumblebees help a lot of fruits that we get from trees and bushes.
I learned that the pigs and everything, they go in this huge barn